I know that we've all watched very intently as the conservative comeback began in Virginia and then exploded onto the scene in New Jersey. But as a Massachusetts man who, like my fellow Bay Staters, has over the years been understandably regarded somewhat suspiciously at gatherings like this, let me take just a moment to exult in the victory of Scott Brown. For that victory, by the way, that stopped Obamacare and turned back the Reid-Pelosi-Obama liberal tide, we have something to say that you'd never think you'd hear at CPAC. Thank you, Massachusetts. So 2009 was the president's turn to suffer losses. And not just at the ballot box, but also in bill after bill in Congress. And most importantly, in his failure to recognize that the economy needed to be reignited in a powerful, effective way. And also, as with us, how he has responded to his defeats tells us a great deal about him and his team. Now, as you recall, he began by saying that he hadn't failed at all. You remember he gave himself that B+ for his first year in office? Yeah. Tell that to the 4 million Americans who lost their jobs last year and to the millions more who stopped looking for work. Explain that to the financial markets worldwide that gaped at trillion-dollar deficits as far as the eye could see. Square that with the absence of any meaningful sanctions against Iran, even as it races to become a nuclear power, and of course it continues to fund terror. President Obama's self-proclaimed B+ will go down in history as the biggest exaggeration since Al Gore's invention of the internet. So unable to convince us that his failure was actually a success, he turned to the second dodge of losing teams. Try to pin the blame on someone else. Did you happen to see his State of the Union address? Of course, first he took on the one group in the room that was restrained from responding, the Supreme Court. The president found it inexplicable that the First Amendment right of free speech should be granted not just to labor union corporations and media corporations, but equally to all corporations, big, medium, and small. Of course, when it was over, I think most Americans felt as I did. His noisy critique and bombast did not register as clear and convincingly as Justice Alito's silent lips forming these words, "Not true." Next, of course, he blamed the Republicans in the room, first condescending to lecture us on the workings of the budget process, a process many of them in that room had, in fact, mastered while he was still at Harvard Law School. He went on to blame Republicans for the gridlock that has blocked his favorite legislation. But of course he knows as well as everybody in the country does that not one single solitary Republican vote in either house is required to pass his legislation, or was not until that guy just got elected. It was in fact Democrats who blocked him. Democrats who said no to his liberal agenda after they'd been home to their districts and heard from the American people. As Everett Dirksen used to say long ago, when they felt the heat, they saw the light. God bless every American who said no. Of course, the president accuses us of being the party of no. It's as if he thinks that by saying no is by definition a bad thing. In fact, as you know, it's right and praiseworthy to say no to bad things. It's right to say no to cap and trade, no to card check, no to government health care, no to higher taxes. My party, our party, can never be a rubber stamp for rubber check spending. But before we move away from this no epithet that the Democrats are fond of trying to apply to us, let's ask the Obama folks why they say no. No to a balanced budget, no to reforming entitlements, No to malpractice reform. No to missile defense in Eastern Europe. No to prosecuting Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in a military tribunal. No to tax cuts that create jobs. You see, we conservatives don't have a corner on saying no. We're just the ones who say it when it's the right thing to say. And of course, that leads us to the group that he has most recently charged with being culpable for his failures, the American people. It seems that we have failed to understand his wise plans for us. If he just slows down, he reasons, and makes a concerted effort to explain Obamacare in words we can understand, if we just listen better, then we'll get it. Actually, Americans have been listening quite attentively, and they've been watching. When he barred C-SPAN from covering the health care deliberations, they saw President Obama break his promise of transparency. When the Democratic leadership was empowered to bribe Nebraska's Senator Nelson, they saw President Obama break his promise of a new kind of politics in Washington. And when he cut a special and certainly unconstitutional deal with the unions, they saw him not just break his promise, they saw the most blatant and reprehensible manifestation of political payoff in modern memory. No, Mr. President, the American people didn't hear and see too little. They saw too much. Here again, with all due respect, President Obama fails to understand America. He said, and I quote, "With all the lobbying and horse trading, the process left most Americans wondering, what's in it for me?" End of quote. That's not all what they were asking. They were asking, what's in it for America? America will not endure government-run health care, a new and expansive entitlement, and inexplicable and surely vanishing cuts in Medicare, and an even greater burden on taxes. That's why America said no, because Obamacare is bad care for America. Now, when it comes to shifting responsibility for failure, however, no one's been a more frequent object of President Obama's reproach than President Bush. It's wearing so thin that it's a regular joke on late-night TV. I'm convinced that history will judge President Bush far more kindly. You'll recall he pulled us from a very severe and deepening recession after 9/11. He overcame the teachers' unions to make sure that we could test our kids, see how well they're doing, and evaluate schools that were underperforming. He took down the Taliban in Afghanistan, and he waged a war against the jihadists, and was not afraid, by the way, to call it what it was, a war. And he kept us safe. And I respect his silence, even in the face of the assaults on his record that come from this administration. But at the same time, I also respect the loyalty and indefatigable defense of truth that comes from our I don't give a damn Vice President Dick Cheney. I'm afraid that after all the finger-pointing is finished, it's become clear who's responsible for President Obama's lost year, the 10% unemployment year: President Obama and his fellow Democrats. So when it comes to pinning blame, pin the tail on the donkeys.